All right, Josh, can you talk in chat? See if the chat can hear you, or just talk.
Hello.
There we go. Hey, did you guys hear Josh? Hey, there you go. All right, we're good. There we go. We can hear you.
Sweet.
Perfect. All right. Give me a second. Let me get myself ready. All right, I'm good. Let me know when we're good to start.
I think we're good. Paul, you ready?
I'm ready to go whenever.
Oh, great.
Sweet.
Hi, Paul. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, man?
Oh, the tower, man. It's just so good. It's
I
so.
saw you playing when I went to bed last night, and I saw you when I got into work this morning. Hopefully, you weren't up all night.
No. I got a little bit of sleep, as
Okay.
much as I possibly could, but it was so much fun. These anima powers are completely ridiculous. I told my community it's probably the best time I've had playing WoW in a very very long time.
Good. I,
So
I clipped that and sent it to my team. So that was very good to hear.
oh awesome. Before we start with the questions, if you want to just introduce yourself to my community, so you know what you do at Blizzard, that'd be great.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Kubit. I'm a game designer. Worked on World of Warcraft for the last 10 years or so. I am currently working on Torghast and the Maw, and historically have done all sorts of things for World of Warcraft, ranging from quests to professions to live content like micro holidays and Chromie and stuff like that. Helped a lot with the the first crunch when we kind of scaled the world and made all the zones scalable. And so I've been kind of a utility designer for a while. Most recently, the last couple of years, been spending a lot of time myself in Torghast.
Awesome. We can easily say Torgas is like your baby.
Torghast is my baby. Yes, I hope you guys are taking good care of her.
Oh, we are. Lots of feedback coming your way. All right, cool to get started with some questions.
Absolutely, whenever it's clever.
All right. So when we hit 60 in the Shadowlands, will we be able to access the tower immediately, or is it going to be one of those situations where we're going to have to wait until like the Mythic Plus week comes out or the Raid week comes out to access it?
Yeah, you should be able to get into the tower shortly after hitting 60. It should be totally within reach on day one of hitting level 60 for sure. It won't be right away. There's probably a couple of things to do to just learn about how for your character to learn how to get in, learn what the Maw and Torghast are all about. So that takes the form of quests and other types of content. But one of my favorite moments in any expansion is kind of that moment where you hit max level and then just like everything lights up, like you can do world quests now, or you can go to raids or the heroic dungeons or whatever your thing is, and there's all sorts of extra quest lines which take you off to different corners of the world. This would be one of those things. It's one of those things which kind of, okay, you've hit 60. If this is the thing which you're most interested in, you can kind of work your way towards getting into Torghast sooner, or you can focus on getting into the Mythic Plus, or whatever's your thing.
Right. Awesome. So it's pretty much like a storyline will kind of introduce you to the tower and whatnot. And then that's when you can just start your adventures in there.
Yeah, it's pretty tightly tied into the covenant system, which also choosing your covenant is something which happens at max level, or at least close to it, and it's important just for the mechanics of the tower as well, that you've kind of made your covenant choice by then. Because as you've probably seen, there's powers which tap into your covenant choice, and you'd be missing out on some of
Right.
those if you didn't have them. So whether in this case it's the alpha forces you into the Kyrian covenant, so the summon steward and whatever your Kyrian class ability is, there's powers that affect those.
Awesome. So as we've been playing the alpha, we've noticed that every couple of floors we encounter a boss, right? And we kill the boss and he drops loot. And, we all get excited about loot. The community loves loot. WoW players love loot. So that loot that we're gonna is that actual like gear? Or is that cosmetic? And is if so, if it's actual gear, what would be the equivalent? I guess maybe like item level wise, it would be equivalent to like a Mythic Zero dungeon or like a normal mode raid or.
Sure. So there's kind of two answers to this. The first is sort of a cop-out answer, which is we don't actually know yet.
Okay.
Everything that's in there is, or a number of things in there are at least a placeholder and usually labeled as such. We have built-in time to figure out how this whole the itemization of Torghast works alongside other systems, so we can hit all the goals of Torghast, which is like you should have things that you want to get in Torghast, but you shouldn't be able to get everything in here. So it shouldn't be like a world where every single system drops drops gear and Azurite, as in the case of would be in the case of BFA or Anima, as a similar system in Shadowlands. You want to also, like, the things that you get in here should be compelling to players who want to play a lot. For players who don't have a lot of time to play a lot, it should also be compelling to people who are normally like intimidated by this type of instance content, right? Like, we want Torghast to be a system which is accessible not just for people who like yourself, who are cutting edge players who do mythic raids and stuff like that, but also people who just might want to dip their toe into this, but they only want to do it solo because they don't want the pressure of playing with other folks. And that's the way that I play a lot of the time as well. And we want to make sure it's rewarding for that. So those are the goals. The actual answer, the less cop-out answer, is you probably won't get a lot of actual like equipable gear in Torghast. One of the things we're trying to do in Shadowlands is make sure that different systems have different things that you can target. And so there will be ways to get gear for sure. And those will be by and large the ways that you get gear now. So get gear from raids, get gear from Mythic Plus and the Mythic Plus chest, or the evolution of that system that you see in 9.0. You get good gear from emissary rewards, or the evolution of that system as well. Torghast, you will be getting legendaries, as you've seen from the also placeholder legendary dust that you get from the currently Algalon looking chests in there. You'll also get souls. Right now, that the real benefit of the souls that you're saving in Torghast is the immediate benefit of the stats that they give you, which is welcome. But souls are something that is actually very valuable to your covenant as well. Like, every soul that you save, one has an opportunity to be someone who is actually like an important, powerful soul that can help you in your adventures moving forward. But also just there's a drought of souls in the Shadowlands right now. Like, currently the machinery of death is broken, and souls aren't coming into most of these realms. All of them are pouring straight into the Maw. So every soul that you're able to bring back to Bastion or Maldraxxus or Ardenweald or Revendreth is one that they can put to use right away. So you're going to have reason to want to go into the Maw and Torghast to save them as well. There will also be plenty of cool like cosmetics and stuff like that. But I would imagine probably not loot that has an eye level on it.
Got it. And for those cosmetics, is the currency going to be like those freed souls that we collect that we see in the currency tab now?
I wouldn't think so. First of all, every soul is precious, and souls are not a currency.
Okay.
Souls are
they're in the currency tab. I had to ask.
Yes. Souls should be more than a currency. Souls are not going to be something that you're spending to get anything. The way that works is more that the more souls you bring to your covenant, you'll be able to unlock. Your covenant will grow, and the covenant will be able to provide better access to you, awesome. Better features to you. So, you won't be there won't be any vendors that sell you cool looking wings for the low price of 999 souls.
That sounds terrible, doesn't it? All right, and so in Shadowlands we have the weekly chests. Yes. So how will Torghast affect weekly chest loot, or does it even affect the weekly chest loot? And if so, is there like any kind of minimum requirement that you guys are looking toward having us get to make it affect the chests?
I honestly don't know whether Torghast will affect the weekly chest or not. Okay. There's a world where it does and a world where it doesn't. Uh-huh. The weekly chest will for sure take into account things like Mythic Plus, obviously, which it already does. And also we're looking at raids and PvP as other systems which can tap into that. There could be other things as well. It could tap into things like world quests and emissaries like Torghast. Torghast will also have a rewarding rewards loop of its own that it may not need to, but that's not something that's off the table. So I don't. Things could change in the future. We'll see.
Awesome. And in talking about rewards, so what kind of are there any like extreme rewards you get from going higher and higher in Torghast?
Yeah. Like in general, like stepping back, rewards are one of the things that we kind of finish our designs on after a lot of the actual content is put in. So in a lot of cases, the feature defines what rewards it will get. And since Torghast is still pretty early, like stepping back even a step further, we released Torghast on alpha very early, like earlier than we'd normally release any of our other features. We had a goal actually to get it out the very first week of alpha, and we decided to hold off for one extra week to get in a couple things we wanted to get in, but also to kind of let Bastion have an opportunity to shine and be the focus of people's playtesting that very first week. But Torghast is actually fairly early on in development, and so you're going to see lots of things in there that that are unfinished. I'm sure you saw plenty of like untextured assets, but it's not just the art and the look of the place which is unfinished. It's also the design. So there's only a couple of classes which are playable. Those should be coming online soon. There's going to be things that change. There's going to be things that get better. There might also be things that you've fallen in love with that may change or go away as well. So if folks keep giving us feedback, we can iterate with that in mind, that like I really love this particular playstyle, this combination of powers, this one power, this whatever. Please continue to let us know that. So we are early, and rewards will be coming on later. The legendary dust that you get from those chests, take that with a grain of salt. The rewards that you see in there are really only put in to kind of get players and us as developers in the frame of mind to know that this is where we're going to be getting legendaries. But it very well might not take that format of getting just a couple reagents every couple floors. But one goal is to make sure that the higher you climb, the more stuff you get. So you should always have a reason to want to get higher and higher into the tower. And it's been inspiring to me to see how many folks are bashing their heads against heroic difficulty, which is for sure tuned beyond the eye level that you are put at in Torghast. And it's also just kind of very hand-wavingly tuned as well. Tuning is not something that we've spent an inordinate amount of time on yet as well. That's something which will happen more down the line. There's a couple powers in here which are crazy bonkers overpowered, which will probably be tuned back at some point in the future. And there's a couple creatures which are probably cannot be defeated by many groups and for sure many solo players, even with perfect play, if you run into them on your first floor of a heroic run. So but there's something fun about that, right? About like seeing how high of a floor I can get to. If I could just squeeze out a little bit more DPS or get a lucky run or something like that, if I can get that god combo of powers, then I can get really high into the tower, and you should be rewarded for that.
Awesome. Yeah, just don't touch the Taragru. As I say, Taragru.
Terragru, yeah,
Terragru. Don't.
Yep.
He's like the all-star right now. he is like Fell Reaver 2.0, and he is so horrifying when he comes out. We love him.
Good. Yeah, the goal with Terragru was to, we wanted to make sure that like even if you are running into trouble, that like there's still always like a little bit of hope. There's all for sure despair and fear, but also like a little bit of hope because he's a creature, and so he can be counterplayed a little bit. Some of the leashing that can happen right now, especially with like blink mages and things like that, are maybe a little wild. But yes, like the spirit of the Terragru lives on.
Right. And now you touched on legendaries a small bit, and I don't want to go too much into it because I know it's so early. But do you know yet if there will be any kind of cap to the reagents in the tower for legendary crafting materials?
It will be. Yes, probably. Like there, I would think of it as probably similar to the way that Mythic Plus works now, where you can climb as high as you want, but that if you go beyond Mythic 15, you're not really getting rewards for it. You're just doing it to kind of prove how far you can get. I would imagine that your progress from Torghast works in a similar way, where there is a very highly tuned but achievable maximum level at which you're going to get rewards, and then beyond that, there may be achievements and cosmetics and things like that, and that level may scale up as the expansion continues on. But that's probably how rewards will work for the legendaries. The goal should be that like you will be getting with any reasonable amount of play enough reagents to be able to get your first legendary, I'd say, within your first couple weeks of hitting 60. So it should be something which is within reach. No promises there. That's again something that can be tuned, but that seems about right. Like you should be able to, like if you're playing a healthy amount of of World of Warcraft that like maybe you're finishing up your first legendary by the time that raids come out. Who knows?
Right. Awesome. And now with the legendary recipes themselves, I don't know if we can talk too much about that, but will there be a legendary recipe for each like piece of armor, trinket, ring, weapon slot offhand, or is it just specifically a couple of pieces? Do we know that yet?
We have plans to have legendaries for every armor slot except trinkets and weapons.
Okay.
So, and the reason there is that the eye level of legendaries happens to be very high, and eye level just affects trinkets and weapons so much more than any other
Right.
other slot that like it almost makes it a non-choice. So we want to make this a choice, and we plan to have legendary affixes, which are are limited to a particular slot. This makes sense in a lot of cases. Like boots will give you things that affect your movement speed and things like that, and oftentimes belts are like defensives and stuff like that because it's kind of right your big buckle right there in front of you. So want to give you that choice without just kind of putting everything on weapons and trinkets. Where if for like min-max gaming, you would almost always want to have your legendary at.
Awesome. And for anima power, is there going to be any legendary anima power? Because I noticed that when we open the little UI for it, you have like gray quality. It looks like green, blue, purple. So is it possible we get a legendary anima power in the future?
It is for sure possible. Yeah, I think something like that sounds really really cool, and it makes you think like what with the current power level of where some of those epics are, what a legendary might be. Yeah, nothing to announce about that quite yet, but I think that's for sure a direction that anima powers could push. I'll also, like, while we're on the subject, throw out like one of the changes, which is probably coming in an upcoming patch of the alpha, is a little bit of remixing of what the rarities of those powers mean. I would expect in the future probably to see more commons and slightly fewer uncommons and rares. But you've also seen in play that like common doesn't necessarily mean bad.
Right.
Common in a lot of cases is just something which is simple, something that you always want. It's not going to hurt you. It's usually just increase damage or reduce the cooldown on one of your good abilities, or make small rats explode. It's never gonna have any trade-offs. Whereas epics are transformative. A lot of times they have a kiss curse design where there's something good about them, but something which you have to think about to build into your rotation, and then uncommons and rares kind of fill in the spectrum in between. So as far as rarity goes, that's something which will start happening more. That also means that with more commons, you should start to see a lot more interesting powers start to show up in those smaller anima cells that just happen to randomly drop from a patrolling non-elite creature. Sometimes they'll drop a cell, right? And usually those are just a single common, increase your haste or versatility, or give you the bloating fodder or something like that. There should be a lot more cool powers that come out of those.
No, that's great to hear. Us tanks, we love our gray 20% maximum health increase. So we're completely down with that. Now,
is that too high? Should I lower it?
No. I mean,
okay.
Actually, just increase it if you'd like. We don't mind at all. I don't think any of the classes and specs mind. I think some as of this morning, we're able to get up to about 900,000 health. So
it's good to see like people already taking defensives too. It's so easy to, like, with a system like this, just go like damage. Damage is the answer to everything. Having the extra health is just a crutch for not enough damage, right? We'd hopefully like to have a system where Torghast requires you to take a certain amount of defense, especially in like cutting edge, when you are really pushing the difficulty level for your skill level and item level. That like you need to have a healthy balance of offensive and defensive and utility abilities to succeed and complete a run.
I completely agree. Now this is more like a scenario in the tower. So let's say I've been in the tower for an hour. I'm like at floor, I don't know, let's say like 35 or 40. Maybe that takes longer than an hour. And I need to like step away from the computer. I got to go have an emergency or something. Is there any kind of like break from the tower you could take besides just AFKing in there and not leaving? Like, is there any kind of like stop and continue kind of plans for the tower? Like skips? More or less?
Yeah, this is something we've talked about a little bit. We don't have any plans to do that right now. I think the solution to this problem, at least kind of as we see it right now, is to make sure that your runs last a reasonable amount of time. That we don't have the default par time for a Torghast run be an hour and a half. I don't think that's right for a mode which is so heavily inspired by roguelikes. Like roguelikes are fun to play, and then they're also like fun to lose, and then like try and not lose that in that way again, or to try again from scratch, and like maybe things will go better this time. And so one of the things we've been doing is just trying to make sure that our runs are of a reasonable length. Like dev backstory, this is really the genesis of the so-called broker levels, right? The little break levels that like we want to have the feeling of continuing to ascend, but we can't have every level be just this exploration of a big giant area with fighting monsters. Like sometimes you want to have that little break where you just get, save a couple souls, pick up an anima power or two, spend some of the phantasma that you've gotten, and then continue on your way. There's very likely a world where an actual Torghast run is just 6 floors. Like you just end at through 6 floors, and that gets you into that like a run lasts around 30 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes 40, but then you can do a couple runs in a row. The 12 floor runs that we have in now, and then the largely infinite run, it's not really infinite, but effectively infinite run for heroic, are really there just kind of for people to test. They work well for alpha. There may be a world where we actually do have something like that on live, but there also it might be that the actual Torghast experience is something where you are pushing yourself to build a really cool roguelike build over the course of 6 floors, and then if you succeed by defeating the boss at the end, then you succeed, and if you don't, then hopefully you can try again.
And in that situation where, let's say, we get through the 6 floors and we defeat the boss, will we be able to go to 7, or is there going to be like a cap of floors?
No, so like if we go with something like that, I would imagine that once I defeat the boss on 6, I can start at 7 at that point, and then go from 7 to 12. And if I'm able to beat that boss, then I'm able to go from 13 to 18. And there comes a point where, as you've seen with easy, normal, and heroic now, where just starting at that high level floor without the benefit of any anima powers is tough. Now, one of the things that we're missing from the soup right now is the ability to change your eye level outside of Torghast, right? Like getting gear, improving the strength of your soul binds, which is one of the systems in the covenants which we've talked a little bit about, but haven't really dug too deep into. Is going to make you stronger, and so like there will be brick walls that your character will run into that will be surpassed with gear. This is one of the reasons why you don't currently and probably, or at least fairly likely, will not see any kind of meta progression powers in Torghast. There's not a whole lot of your next run in Torghast, you're going to be 10% stronger, because Torghast exists within the context of World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has all these other systems that you can make your character stronger anyways. And so the answer, if you're running into a brick wall, is sometimes it's to get good, but in other cases, it is to get gear, right? To go get go power up outside of the system.
Awesome. So when playing in groups and playing solo, I mean, a lot of people love the solo gameplay. I'm personally a little bit of a lone wolf myself. I love the solo stuff, but last night made me realize just how much fun it was playing in a group, and how hysterical and like how much lunacy there could be involved in with all these anima powers. So to you, like, what would be like the biggest benefits of playing in a group? Like, would you say it's just for fun to play with your friends, or is there some bigger vision with group gameplay?
If you ask me, like this is just like Paul answer now. The best thing about a group is the fun that you have, right? Like in our playtests, it's so much more fun with a group because, like you said, wild things happen. You're talking to one another. Powers are built in a lot of cases with the expectation that like this is fun solo, but it's more fun in a group. Things like the golden idol that lets you see who has any treasure or anima cells on them, that encourages people to talk with one another, right? Like one person will say, I'm taking the golden idol so no one else has to take it. Oh, that guy has treasure over there. Let's go make sure we fight him.
Right.
And then also the interactions that you have with like things like Marets and things like that. So there are things are built with the expectation that it should be more fun in groups. As far as balance goes, I think this is probably a little idealistic, but it should like at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter if you go solo or group. That like you should be able to get roughly as far in either setting. That probably won't be exactly true just because of the the challenges of balancing such a wild system like this. But if we do err on the side of either one, it'll probably be that you can probably get a little farther in a group. So you might be encouraged to, like, if you're on the fence, invite some of your friends to come with you. It's not going to be queuable. It'll be something that you have to go in with your group pre-made. So it'll be something that you'll probably want. Either you can use the group finder, but ideally, play with some friends, with people that because that also is more fun.
Right.
And what was I getting with that? Your question was, groups, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So
if there's any benefits, like, at all, like, I guess I don't know.
I remember what. Yeah, it was that you shouldn't feel like if you want to go into Torghast, that you're wasting an opportunity if you go solo or if you go in a group, right? That's the fidelity of tuning that we should be shooting for. That, like, if I go in solo, I can still I'm not wasting any of the key or anything that's required and to be able to get into Torghast.
Awesome. No, that's great. I mean, like I said, after last night, I never want to solo this place again. I just want to play with my community, play with my friends. It was just a whole ball of fun. And now, for specific roles, are there any changes? I know, like, how we have it right now currently in Visions on live, that tanks deal with mobs that have lesser health, so do healers. Is that going to be a thing with Torghast, or is it not going to be a thing just because the Anima powers are so crazy that it won't need to be a thing?
I think that second case, where the Anima powers are so crazy that it might not be a thing, is a good goal. Right now, it actually does work the same way as Horrific Visions. Not with the exact same numbers, but we do have that same kind of tech behind the scenes where the game knows what spec you are, it knows what role you are, and will tune creatures to match those roles. One of the lessons we learned actually from Horrific Visions is that not all, say, DPS specs are created the same, right? Some can do significantly better than others, and so we actually have modified that to be per spec tuning instead of per role tuning. So if we need to have those knobs, we can. Now, again, this is maybe a bit idealistic, but, like, there could be a solution where we say that in Torghast, we actually don't need to use any of those tuning knobs, that a creature on level 1 is always the same. Doesn't matter if you're tank, healer, DPS, demon hunter, warlock, whatever, because the presence of Anima powers gives you the flexibility to be able to change yourself to be able to situate those to those circumstances. Like, if I'm a healer, I have enough self-healing that I probably have to take less defensives to be able to survive a difficult thing, whereas if solo DPS or a party of 5 DPS without any healers or tanks would have to take a lot more defensive powers at the expense of offensive powers to be able to make it to the end. So we do have a little bit of room there where the tuning might end up in that space where we don't have to use those dials to say, okay, like, we actually have to lower health for healers because they don't have as much damage throughput. But at the end of the day, those tuning knobs exist if we need them.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited for 5 tank Torghast to see how that works out with the health pools.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fun.
So I noticed that some mobs on some of the floors, if you stand in their bad, they give you like a debuff, almost like you're kind of like, and it doesn't have a duration. It's just permanent until they drop the Anima power. You could choose whether you want to get rid of the debuff or go with another power and stick with it. It's I want to say it's kind of like an affix, but is there any plans in the future to have like an affix system for Torghast, where, like, the higher you go up, you'll get maybe like some sort of debuff, like, you're taking this much more damage every second, not so much like a Grievous kind of deal, but
right,
like, yeah.
Sort of. Like, affixes are a cool idea. There's nothing, like, specific to announce there, but, like, there may be a need for it. Like, right now, when you scale the tower, it's just damage and health that scale, and sometimes that's just not enough, as we've learned is the case with Mythic Plus, right? Like, you need complexity in addition to just raw numbers. Also, to kind of set expectations, it may be necessary for us, like, especially at higher levels, to introduce some mechanics which are, like, I'm going to say a bad word here, and it's bad for me too, but, like, soft timers.
Oh boy.
So like, yeah,
stop it, Paul.
Like, I know. Personally, like, and as a team, like, I think it's important that we hold off as long as we can from adding timers, because as we've heard from like feedback continue, like it's so great that I don't have to worry about a timer in here. Like we can just like kind of have fun. We can take a little break. That lack of a timer is such a hallmark feature of Torghast. But there also comes a point where it negatively affects gameplay, where if you are playing on a live server, which has a totally different feeling than playing on alpha, you're playing with your character where it counts, where there may be a time investment in the key that you use to get into this high floor of Torghast, that if without the lack of a timer, you are incentivized to wait for meta on every pull, to wait for bloodlust on every pull, because like this is the way that you can win. That's the only way that you can win at this level, is to do that. And so I wouldn't want to implement this as a like a timer. Just like, yeah, you have 30 minutes to do this, but imagine things like the jailer sends increasing waves of enemies at you. He notices if you do something that increases the difficulty of creatures on that floor. So like things that are not necessarily timers, that you can still take your time and be methodical. You don't feel like you're racing against the clock. But if you're using an inordinate amount of time, that the floor will become rapidly impossible, or at least more difficult, and so you have to take those things into account. But that would only be I don't think I would even do this in the first several floors of Torghast at the bottom level, where again, for people who are don't have a taste for that type of mechanic, for whom like any type of instance content is can be threatening or a little scary, that like, no, we won't even bother with timers there. It would be something which is like really comes into play later on. So that's kind of tangentially tied to your affix question, but that might be something which does kind of end up landing in that world as we continue to tune and develop.
No, that's awesome. I think right now not having a timer is just it just feels good because you get to explore and not feel rushed. But I do sense a little bit of what you're saying, because I know even yesterday when I was doing a playthrough of my mage, I was like waiting for Lust to come off cooldown so that I can use my what we call the minigun mage, where the type warp just makes you cast like 90% faster, so it's just like arcane blasting on with no CD whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it was so much fun, and I was like, oh man, am I gonna have to wait for Lust now for every boss just to have this much fun?
Yes, hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like that you're not incentivized to play that way, because like at the end of the day, we want it to be fun. So we're gonna make the rule set to have the maximum amount of people have the most amount of fun.
Awesome. So you mentioned like the keys to get to a floor. Will we have keys where we can actually skip floors and get somewhere above, like just normal?
Yes. So there is a plan to have something along the lines of a key to be able to get into the jailer's tower. And the reason for that is just that unlocks the ability for us to give better rewards to be able to get in. So I don't have a final design, but I can maybe bounce a pitch design off you to see how this lands. And see how you think this works as far as key acquisition goes, as compared to say something like Horrific Visions. We compare Torghast in a lot of cases to an older feature, the Withered Army training from Suramar in Legion, right? It's kind of similar to that, right? So imagine a system like that, where that was a world quest which came up every 3 days. Something similar happens here, where every 3 days your Covenant will give you a key just for free. You have a passive key income to Torghast, so you have that, and you can go run this without any input once every 3 days. Or maybe it's a system something like the way that you can, for increasing amounts of currency, purchase keys like you do reroll tokens now. So something like that, but something from your Covenant that you can kind of get some basically for free. In addition, if you'd like to run Torghast more, you can go to the outdoor maw, the area around Torghast, which is a zone in and of itself, and through gameplay there, you earn a currency called Stygia, and spend that Stygia to purchase additional keys to the Jailer's Tower. Maybe that takes 15 minutes of gameplay to purchase one of those. So you have some gameplay outside of the tower that requires you to so you can't just spend the entirety of your time in the tower, but if you want to spend a lot of time in the tower, you can. It just requires spending some time in the maw, and that's also limited as well, whereas if you spend a lot of time in the maw, then you get the Eye of the Jailer debuff and he sees you and it becomes more difficult, but then you can spend that off with Anima, which you get in other zones. So so you go play other zones to get Anima, to pay off your Eye of the Jailer, to go run that some more in the Maw to get some more keys to run Torghast. So there exists a system where you can play the Jailer's Tower as much as you want, but you can't play the Jailer's Tower and nothing else. You can't just do Torghast without spending time in other parts of the game.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I do like the way that you can get keys as you're explaining it. Different methods, different content in the game to get it. Kind of reminds you of just getting coalescing visions from doing dailies and then turning those in to get the vessel eventually to go in. I think what a lot of the community is I guess trying to get a feel for is kind of like what we have right now, right? Like we play every day, do all our dailies, do everything we possibly can, and we get about 6 vessels to get into a vision. So I guess what would it be? Do you think, is there like a number you guys have in mind for Torghast? Like how many keys would you think is reasonable for an everyday player who does their dailies every day and does everything they possibly can to get all the currency needed to then exchange for a key?
I don't think we think about it as like a max number that way, because with this system, at least the one that I kind of pitched a minute ago, it's actually ungated as far as like I guess there's probably a maximum amount of anima you can get per week, but it's a very large number, and it requires a level of play that few players get to. So instead, better way of thinking about it is that if you're really interested in playing Torghast, you can play in Torghast for a certain percentage of the time that you're playing. Maybe that's, for someone who wants Torghast and nothing else, maybe it's 35% of your time. So like you can spend, if you're playing 10 hours a week, you can spend 3 hours there. If you're playing 40 hours a week, spend 12 hours in there. So that like, because again, like it is something which we want to be rewarding. You feel like you're getting a lot of rewards out of climbing Torghast, but to do that, we need to make sure that, it's not the only thing. We want to make sure that we don't have any systems where like the best way to play also is to play one system until you get sick of it, right? Like there's value in having incentive structures that send you to different parts of the game. So that's where that thought process comes from. I understand also that like it's super fun right now to play Torghast ungated, just to go in over and over and over again. And there's a couple goofy things that come out of that. Like right now, you can walk in without a key and see the very first anima power that you get, and like, oh, this isn't good. Leave, come back in. Leave, come back in. That does not necessarily engage in gameplay make. So like that's one of the risks. But there's other risks involved in just like giving ungated access. But maybe there exists a world where we can have a mode of Torghast which is ungated, which rewards you things like cosmetics and things like that. And that's something that we'll look into, and for sure, if we think that makes the game, again, the most fun for the most amount of people, we'll do it.
Awesome. Now, with all the anima that we're seeing right now in the alpha, I'm seeing like I'm getting to like floor 11, and I have like 40 plus anima powers. Is this going to be normal on live, or is this just a testing phase? Is this just for the alpha phase?
It's not intentionally high, but I think it's probably a little high right now, just the number of powers you get. So stepping back, like the way we think that you should get powers is, I think you should get some, like, there's typically one on the end of every floor, right? So you'll have some where you defeat a boss, or there's sometimes just an unguarded chest there with some anima at the end that you can, an anima cell you can get. There's also anima that comes from like opt-in challenges, right? Like sometimes you'll see one at the end of a corridor that has a bunch of scary traps on it, or on a rare or an elite creature that is called out as like someone who is a powerful minion of the jailer. And then there's also you should always have the constant threat of like, I can just kill a creature that's wandering around non-elite, and they might drop a power as well. So you're encouraged to hunt around and be thorough and find as much as you can. So let's say that ends up being, you have one of each of those every floor. That's about 3 per floor. So for a 6-floor run, maybe shoot for 18 or 20 anima powers. There's also some that'll come from the brokers that you're purchasing in the shackled brokers and so on. So yeah, maybe in a 6-floor run, let's say 20 is about right. So I've seen people ending up these 12-floor runs with closer to like 50, and I think that it starts to become overwhelming after a while. A better world is where those powers are maybe fewer, but maybe a little bit even more impactful, or have the potential to be more impactful. So there's tuning to be that could potentially be done there for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Because one of the worries I see people talking about is like, oh man, what a hell of a weak aura I'm gonna need to track all these anima powers directly on my screen without clicking on the little anima power button. Because the UI is great, but everyone loves their add-ons and how to see information faster. But no, that's good to hear. Because I mean, like we were getting to floor 12 and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I just press buttons and everything's just exploding and it's great. It's amazing. I don't know what's going on, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to see what sort of creative UI designs people come up with to support Torghast play. That should be fun to see.
Absolutely. And the difficulty is easy, normal, hard. That's also just alpha, right? We won't be able to do Torghast on live and be like, I want to queue up with my friends or enter at normal, heroic, and mythic or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. The very presence of that Wayfinder, I think it's called, the thing in that entry room is something which is there to facilitate testing. I would imagine that the entrance hall to Torghast, or the lobby, as I've heard some people so lovingly refer to it, is something which will also be leveling up within the next couple of weeks of alpha.
Awesome. And now with every time I've gone into a floor, almost every single, it's looked different. And it's so cool to see that. And I've seen some repeatedly, and others I've seen brand new, or even bosses. I haven't seen this boss. I haven't seen this rare yet. And I've done this already about maybe 100 floors worth through all my characters. How many iterations are there of these floors in the tower? Will floor number 10 look different like the first 30 times I encounter it? Or how did the team do all that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of, especially early on, iteration on exactly how much procedural generation we use for Torghast, and we have a lot of help as well, because there's some expert developers at Blizzard who are very good at procedural generation. The folks over in the other building who work on Diablo, we met with them and talked a lot with them about how they make their levels and spawn their creatures, and took some lessons from them. A little bit of a history lesson. Actually, when we first started developing this feature, before it was even called Torghast, it was just, we knew we wanted to have this. I think it was called the Armory, the Jailer's Armory, or something like that. You were going to get cool weapons in here that eventually ended up becoming anima powers. We made an A/B test where we had levels which were procedurally generated, and they were very very plain. They were like cube shaped levels of with square corners. It looked very early 3D shooter Wolfenstein-esque levels, but they were procedurally generated. They were completely different every single time. And then we also made a version which used the Suramar dungeon, I forget the name of the dungeon, but the underground one, the Archway, yeah. Used portions of the Archway, and it would put in doors here and there to block off portions of it, and to determine, okay, how much fun is it to actually have procedural generation versus fixed levels but with procedural creatures in them. And it turned out it was really a negligible difference, if any at all. In fact, the other one seemed better just because it looked better. And so because of that, we actually have the levels that you play in Torghast are fixed, curated, custom designed levels built by expert level designers and dungeon artists who know how to build this type of thing. There's a lot of them, but they're all kind of hand built. And you've also seen in some cases, sometimes they're very large, but portions of them are cut off. So you're playing with different portions of the level. As far as the spawning goes, the spawning is procedural for the most part. It uses some things that we've learned from islands, but also kind of merges that with the way that we've historically spawned dungeons. So you have the dungeon knows that it should spawn something of medium difficulty here, of high difficulty here, and it also knows based on where you're at, what type of floor ecology, it should be this type of creature or this type of creature. Maybe sometimes it's moss-worn Kyrians, sometimes it's shades, sometimes it's fire-themed Jailer's Forces, and so on. But those creatures can change from run to run, along with the bosses and mini bosses and things like that. So it's heartening to me to hear that after almost a full day of playing, that you haven't you're continuing to see new things.
That's great.
So that's good. We need to make sure that it lasts significantly longer than that. So I would expect even more breadth of creatures, of special things to start popping into the Torghast levels as we continue to develop the feature.
Yeah, so that was gonna be my next question. Like, how big is the actual creature list gonna end up being for Torghast? From now until maybe like mid to end Shadowlands, is it gonna be just hundreds of different creatures and models or whatnot?
There should be lots of stuff. So I mean, yes, it's not going to be infinite. There will be a lot. I think that like you're seeing almost all of the kind of the base layer of spawning now. So there's 6 major ecologies. Those are tied to the 6 subzones that you may have seen in there, which are Skoldus Hall, Fracture Chambers, the Soul Forges, the Cold Heart Interstitia, Mortragar, and the Upper Reaches. But I think that a lot of the variation will come with those special things, the mini bosses, the rares, the bosses at the end of levels, which are things that you may or may not have seen in previous runs. But also, there's even with roguelikes, which change every time, there's still a mastery curve, right? Like there should be something that you like, oh, I know how to beat this guy. Yeah, we ran into him last time and he has this big AoE Nova you have to run out of or whatever. That having a fixed number of creatures helps helps give you that mastery curve of like eventually you will have seen most, if not everything, and know how to counter it and have mastered the system.
Awesome. No, they look great so far, so I'm anxious to see what other kind of creatures you guys can spawn on top of us in the future.
Good.
So now, just to get that out of the way, the broker and the bosses, they're fixed on their levels, right? So I can always expect to see the broker on this level and the boss on this level, or will that change at all?
I think that so yes, currently right now, brokers show up on the break levels and then immediately before a boss, and the bosses are on the every 6th floor. The broker's vendor list is changes each time. And also, by the way, the broker's vendor list is one of those things which is very alpha. You've probably noticed that like a lot of times you have more phantasma than you can spend. That's not intended. I think a more interesting world is one where if you have a lot of phantasma, it gives you more purchasing power, gives you more interesting choices. So expect those vendor lists to change to something which is a little bit more robust at some point in the future. But they are fixed. I also think that it might be an interesting power to have the ability to spawn a shackled broker somewhere, so that you can use that power and it just spawns a broker right there next to you. Might give you some interesting reasons to, especially if you can have get 2 brokers right next to one another, to use the Ravenous Orb to juice one of the brokers so that you can get his 500 Phantasma and then spend it on the other. So we don't encourage juicing the brokers, but that is something that you can
no,
you can do.
now with Phantasma inside of Torghast, you can collect that infinitely. Yes, there's no cap on that, or is there like some sort of
no, there's no cap. In fact, like I think that one of the interesting builds, which will become more interesting once we have a more fully fleshed out vendor list, is we refer to it internally as the Baron build, right? Where like you really want to take that unstable Phantasma lure, which increases your Phantasma income by 25%, and then take as much Phantasma as you can, so that you can be the guy in your group, especially if you're running as a group, who's like, when you get to the vendor, a couple people have a couple hundred, but you've got 3,700 Phantasma. You could just buy all kinds of crazy stuff. Maybe there's things which have some increasing costs on the vendor, so like you can buy a lot of stacks of a particular thing because you chose to forego power for like physical power, or like martial power for economic power, and so you're going to make your group stronger that way. I think that's an interesting way to play, especially in groups.
Yeah, I could be the daddy big bucks of the group and just be like, hey guys, I got you guys covered. It's all good.
Yeah, and that's another one of those opportunities where you're talking with your group, right? Instead of just kind of playing alongside one another in silence. If you're going to go for that broker build, it behooves you to call it out at least and say like, hey, I got unstable Phantasma lure. I'm going to be looking for more of these, so I can hook you guys up with some additional cells and powers once we get to the broker level.
Awesome, exactly. So as we're doing these floors, I see that we're encountering like bonus objectives, and we're, I guess, freeing these. I guess these would be the heroic spirits that were being referenced to in the post.
Kind of. So like these characters are probably not those heroic spirits. I'd expect more of those later on. I think without exception, all those quest characters are actually living living is a loose term, but corporeal characters from the other realms of the Shadowlands. So they are Fae, they're Venthyr and Kyrians and whatnot. The jailer does not only capture souls. More recently, he's been reaching out into the other planes of the Shadowlands, or the other realms of the Shadowlands, I should say, to take away Kyrians and Venthyr and the like. And so we will see for sure more of that as the expansion continues as well. But like that's who these characters are. There's more story to be told in Torghast and in the expansion for sure. I think also like at this point in the expansion, you probably see a little less story and more just world building, just because the Shadowlands are new. It's a strange place. Before we can get really into a lot of like the story of the place, we just need to understand what it's about, who the Kyrians are, who the jailer is, and maybe what his MO is. And so, especially in kind of the 9.0 time frame, there will be like some story beats which happen in Torghast, but I expect as the expansion continues into patches, that's where the world building has hopefully we've done our job, and then story starts to take the front seat and start to see a lot more kind of major lore characters and story progression and things like that.
Oh, so in Torghast, we possibly might see some major lore characters that we help out along our way, like maybe recently slain ones. Like
for
wink,
sure.
Wink, wink. Ooh, okay.
Yes, absolutely. There's I mean, everybody who's been dying in the recent past has all been going down to the Maw, and so like there are some cosmic wrongs to be righted in the Maw and in Torghast. And Torghast is where the jailer keeps some of his most powerful and most precious prisoners. So yeah, you'll see some cool folks in there for sure.
Awesome. So like this was one question that kind of like I wanted to ask, only because I love to play WoW every day. I want to be there from the first day of 9.0 till the end of the expansion. So with the tower, with Torghast, how would you say this tower might evolve as tiers come out? Patch like 9.1, 9.2 for every like new raid that we get. How will Torghast like evolve alongside us as players as the months and obviously the 2 years or year and a half that the expansion lasts will go on? Like how will it grow?
It will grow for sure. I would expect, yes, more floors, more enemies, more legendaries, more themes and ecologies and powers and just looks of the space. Torghast will stick around for the expansion at least as unless there's any major surprises. I think that Torghast is going to be something that continues to develop throughout the Shadowlands. Now specifically how it develops, a lot of that is up to you, the players, as and us as players as well, as we get into it and start to find out what's fun, what do we need more of, what is a really interesting way to develop the system. Then we'll make those choices. Like a good example might be the addition of heroic warfronts, which is something that warfronts are a similar system, right? And a kind of an expansion wide system, which grew over the time, where we didn't know when 8.0 came out that we were going to do heroic warfronts, but that was the thing that we determined that these are fun. But one thing that would make them funner was if they would be actually like significantly harder. If I was encouraged to come in with friends, if there was a chance that I could lose, if I felt like there was pressure, that also gives us an ability to give better rewards for it. And so that choice was made not early on in expansion development, but as the expansion continued.
Awesome. We only have a few more minutes, so I want to get a little bit into the Maw, the zone itself, because it's very mysterious and dangerous, and we don't know too much about it. What would just, I guess, to answer a question that could answer a lot of other questions, what would it feel like to be a player in the Maw? Like what is the I wake up, I go into the Maw, what am I going to experience when I go there every day?
For sure. So like the Maw is an end game zone. You're gonna dip into the Maw a couple times during your level up for story reasons, but you're gonna spend the most of the time there in the end game. You will see end game style activities. Now that may take the form of things that we're familiar with, like world quests and dailies. But I wouldn't expect the first time that you go into the Maw end game that you open up your map and it looks like any other zone, which is like, oh, there's world quests over here and world quests over here, and I can kind of choose where I want to go. I would expect a smaller amount of things to show on your map, which would give you the framework of what you want to be doing that day. These are the areas that are that are rewarding, either from world quests or from dailies that some of the very few friendly faces within the Maw are able to offer me. So you should know where you want to go, because you have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of ability to do things in the Maw. We've talked about this at BlizzCon, but the Eye of the Jailer is the real hallmark feature of the outdoor Maw. So you kind of have a certain budget of things you can do before your experience gets significantly more difficult. That takes the form of as you complete these objectives and world quests, but also just kind of as time passes, as you continue to spend more time in the Maw, the jailer will get more and more savvy to your presence, and he'll send higher level enemies to attack you. The towers of the outdoor Maw will bombard you. Chains will erupt from the ground to slow you. So you want to do your the most high value things you can do. There will be plenty of things to steal your attention away as well. Expect rare creatures and little small events which pop up, which aren't necessarily on your map, but if you're in that area where things are happening, you'll probably see a good amount of things that, like, oh, I can gather some Stygia over here. Oh, there's a cage full of souls over there, but they're well guarded. But I need these souls for my covenant. I need to bring them back, so I'm going to go do that. And then at some point, you'll realize, like, okay, this is my jumping off point now. The Eye of the Jailer is about to tick up to a really hard level. I'm going to get cut and run and get out with what I have, and hopefully keep most of it without dying.
So it seems like in the Maw, like, you're kind of like not. I don't know if you want to say we're timed in there, but it will get more vicious. Will there be just a way just to kind of like zone out and then zone in, or will there be like a debuff timer where it says, hey, you left the Maw, you can't come back in? Or
I would, So the idea is, once your Eye of the Jailer has increased to a certain level, it sticks around for the rest of the day. So like you're going to do one trip into the Maw per day normally, and if you go back in, then the Jailer, he remembers you. He's still got the same stink that he left on you from last time, and so there are ways. However, there is counterplay. There's counterplay in the zone, where there should probably be some ways that you can avoid incurring Eye of the Jailer for a little bit. Maybe something in the form of like a shroud that hides you from the Jailer for a couple minutes. You can do something that might normally get you a lot of Eye of the Jailer or something like that, and feel and be smart for doing so, and feel smart for doing so. But also, you can spend Anima, which is a currency that you will earn outside of the Maw. There's no useful Anima in the Maw, because it's kind of antithetical to what the Maw is about. Anima kind of dissolves as soon as it gets there. But if I go to Revendreth or Bastion and do world quests there, do other content that is outside of the Maw, I can earn Anima and choose to spend that at the expense of other things to pay to clear my Eye of the Jailer, to start fresh. So if I want to go multiple times in a day, I can do so.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking time today to talk to the community about the Maw and Torghast. Some great information. I appreciate you answering all the questions, and we're gonna keep throwing feedback at you guys, and hopefully we can make this one of the best features in World of Warcraft in a long time.
I appreciate it. They're great questions. It was a lot of fun being here, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Josh.
All right. Thanks. Cheers.
Later. All right. I'm good. Woo! Man. Good Lord. Ah. My God, that's like high level anxiety. Honey, I need a drink. She's like, I got you. What do you guys think, man? I mean, lots of crazy answers there. I love the heroic spirits thing. I didn't want to tell Paul live about, but the heroic spirits thing gave me a boner, man. Because that's what I'm like. Yo, are we gonna see like Arthas in here, Garrosh? I don't want to answer specific. I don't want to say specific. Yeah. How'd I do? Did I do okay? I didn't want to seem like I was too nervous or anything. I'm kind of like Will Ferrell from Old School. When he's like totally Papega, but then like when he had to answer that really hard question in the debate, he kind of just like zoned in and then he snapped out of it later. I blacked out. I don't know what happened. That's exactly how I felt right now. Like I just literally came out of it like, "What's up, guys?" Hammers up. What's going on? No, I mean, hopefully we got a lot of answers to questions that you guys were looking forward to. I don't know. Like, I was trying to pick at some questions, especially the legendary questions. Like, questions about legendaries are so tough with developers because they have no idea how legendaries are going to work out. I was trying to get a feel for, like, okay, how many Legos are we going to get? How often will we get it? Obviously, you said a few weeks. Yeah. Yeah, see, like, I had no idea that the mall was on a timer. Maybe I missed that at BlizzCon or whatnot. Hold on, this mic is crazy. Let me turn my notifiers back on. Sorry about that. I had to literally turn off all my notifiers so that I don't interrupt Paul, because he would be able to hear people subbing, and that would be really annoying. I can imagine like a 50 sub train going on.